Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll just give people a couple of more seconds to start tuning in, but thank you guys so much. So today I have Attorney Elizabeth McCree on, who came to us. We spoke with her before, but she's going to give an update on Lady T's property in the Empire Corridor and the criminal charges against her. And just some information that she knows about, what's happening with the case and possibly some other cases that the city is involved with as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about a project that's going to significantly affect the commercial district in the Empire Corridor and the residents that live there. So,
Okay, I think I figured out how to share it right now.
hi, Deidre. Hi. I'm going to make sure it's sharing on my page as well.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's there. So,
thank you guys for tuning in. I know I just do the same thing. I was like, oh, the sound and everything going on.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, let's jump into it. So if you're just tuning in, we have Attorney Elizabeth McCree here, who is representing the Fleming family in the city's case against them for blighted property. And so maybe about a month ago, we came and just gave you an update on what's happening. So for those of you who are just following this story, Elizabeth, can you just give a brief recap on what's been happening?
Sure. I think it was less than a month ago because it was shortly after the judge denied my motion to dismiss the case for the violations that I stated were due process violations, both procedural and substantive due process. And so the 21-day objection period has passed on that. I did file an appeal to the circuit court. So that's a procedural thing. Berrien County has a combined trial court. So technically, all of the judges are both district court and circuit court judges. But you still have to appeal to the circuit court. It gets assigned to a different judge. And then you hear an appeal from the original judge who heard the motion. So I filed the appeal. I've requested the transcripts. I don't have those yet. I don't know which judge it's assigned to yet for the appeal. So we're waiting for all of those things to happen as far as the appeal is concerned. But the appeal or the application for leave to appeal, because I don't have an automatic right to appeal, that is pending, but that doesn't stop the actual criminal case in the district court. So that case is still assigned to the same trial court judge. We have a status conference December 30th, I believe it is, that Friday before the first of the year. And then jury trial is scheduled for maybe the second week in January. Likely that is going to get changed for several reasons. Number one, the application for leave to appeal, because the appeal that I filed is what's called an interlocutory appeal. So I'm asking that it be heard prior to the jury trial starting. And if I get denied by the circuit court, then I have appellate rights or, the ability to request an appeal with the Court of Appeals after that. So there's a lot of procedural stuff. And also because of Lady T's health situation, I do believe that she should have the right to be able to attend the jury trial if we go to jury trial. And so, those are different things that procedurally are happening right now. So right now we're set for status conference December 30th, trial second week of January, but it's very likely that it probably won't go during that time. Also, I got contacted last week. I think.
Okay, before we go into that, I want to give just a general recap of this case and what's happening. So if I'm saying anything that's wrong, just feel free to interject.
Okay.
We won't have all the dates because I know that you're really locked into all of those things. But if you're familiar with Lady T, she has owned a business. She had owned a business, a barbershop in the Empire Corridor, so right by Empire and Broadway, for a number of years, and has been a strong pillar throughout our community. And earlier this year in January, it was a letter dated for January that she received early February, essentially from the city saying that she had 90 days to demo her property. And that was the only solution given to her. So the building has been vacant for a number of years. I do know that my team and we assessed it. It's pretty dry on the inside. She had replaced the roof in recent years, and so that really helped to maintain the building. if you ride past the building, you'll see that the awning is visibly damaged, things of that nature, but nothing that is, in my opinion, that one can't be rehabbed, and two, it's not far from a lot of other properties in the city. And so in contacting her, we kind of wondered, well, what is the policy? What is the procedure for contacting property owners, and how do you decide which property you kind of give these stipulations to? And so she was never given a list of, if you do X, Y, and Z to make your building compliant, it'll be fine. It was just demo the property. And then that's kind of where, and then within 90 days. And so before that 90 days expiring, the city's attorney filed criminal charges against her. And so that is what Elizabeth McCree has been trying to fight on behalf of this family, to get those charges dropped. We've been in contact with the family, and they are interested in seeing that property come back to life. And a lot of other people in that community and city officials, city leaderships, elected officials have expressed the desire to see that commercial corridor come back as well. And so, and so you want to talk a little bit before we go into that. So because of the city's support seemingly to see this building come back to life, and obviously we want to ensure that the equity remains in the property home, this Black family's hands. We've been working with them. There are a lot of programs that we could benefit from to see these buildings come back to life. And so I have been in contact with the city manager, Ellis Mitchell, who after the meeting with Elizabeth and I spoke at the commission meeting, he said that he would have code enforcement take a look at the building. And so I've emailed him a couple times within these past few weeks. Sometimes I get a reply, sometimes I don't, and I ensure that I tag the entire body on this process. And so my last email from him, obviously I copied code enforcement, and he directed code enforcement. This is a Friday. He directed them to give him a report by that following Monday, which was 2 weeks ago, at least 2 weeks ago now. And so since then, I haven't been able to hear from them. He was having code enforcement look at it with the idea that they will give us a list of things that would need to be addressed in order to, one, remove that property from being a condemned property, and then also drop the charges against Lady T. So that is something that they have actively told us that they have been working to do. And so then I'll pass it back over to Elizabeth to tell you about her correspondence with the city.
Well, before I do that, just to add a few things, Lady T, at one point, her prior husband, and then Lady T herself, and has owned that building for over 50 years. It has been vacant for a substantial number of years, over a dozen years, due to her health issues. She's in her 90s, so she wasn't able to operate her business out of it at that time. But I just want to make sure that this is clear. I know we talked about it last time, but I just want to make sure that it is clear. She is up to date on all taxes, has always been up to date on all taxes, no violations in regards to any of those things. The building was allegedly condemned, and a sign was put on it. There was never any contact made with the family to try to look at the inside of the building before they did that process. I will also state that I have found out from the public defender's office, who is handling multiple other cases that have been filed for this illustrative enumeration charge, that there's a lot of similarities. Many people got the letter that you referenced that was sent in January of 2020. We have come to find out that the person who allegedly signed that letter, who there's no signature on anything, everything is electronic, and a lot of this was before the pandemic. As far as 2020 and different contacts of folks who worked for the city, because they alleged that they condemned Lady T's property back in 2020 before the pandemic as well. But there was no notice on it until December of 2021 before they sent this letter in 2022. The man's name who is on the letter apparently has no knowledge of the letter in the discussions with the investigators from the public defender's office. The person's name, who is essentially an electronic signature on all the condemnation notices, stopped working for the city doing this work at the end of 2021. And so some of them that are dated 2022, he was actually no longer an employee. And there's been other cases where there's been no contact made in regards to viewing the property or looking at the inside of the properties before they've been condemned. So there's several different issues that have come up in multiple cases. There are 2 that are scheduled for trial before mine. And I don't know if they're actually going to go, because there were multiple motions filed by the public defender. And I don't know if those have been heard yet, if they're just going to be heard before trial. But several different issues that are different than Lady T's, particularly one of the biggest issues that may become an issue as we talk later is issue of improper taking based on the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, because some of these properties, people say that they purchased from the city and were apparently in condemnation status before then. They were not properly made aware of it, and then they got ticketed. Wow. The letter, again, says you have to condemn the property or go to this appeal board that doesn't actually exist. So the only option given is the condemnation. The letter does not mention the city code criminal offense at all. And there are multiple cases where the tickets were issued prior to the 90 days that was given in the letter to condemn the property. I do also want to clear up the fact that we did agree to tear down the property, because that was the only option given, both in the code ordinance for the criminal offense and in the letter that was originally given. And with the health issues that Lady T has, coming in to make changes for things that we didn't know we need to change because nobody ever came in to view the property, it was going to be difficult to navigate with her family while they're trying to take care of her health. So we did originally agree to do that. However, we never agreed in any way to sell this property or give this property to anybody else. So even though we knocked down the building, it was still the expectation that Lady T and her family in turn would own the land. And in fact, I first became involved with estate planning for her. And so we were going to do additional estate planning after we got done dealing with this case. But now there's some developments with that. So going back to what you stated, on Monday, I received an email from the city attorney saying that code enforcement wanted to come look inside the building.
I don't know if it's my connection, if we're losing Elizabeth. So I'll just wait for her to come back in. But if you guys are just tuning in, we're just giving an update on Lady T's case against her. And then we'll also be talking a little bit about AEP's plans to develop, to update the power lines, which will significantly affect the development that's happening in that area. Let's see. Deidre said it's frozen. Is it frozen on? Is it still frozen, guys? Give me a second. Let me check and see. All right. Well, it says we're still live, so I'll let her come back in. Let me just message her to say, come back in. All righty. Okay. So it's frozen in her. Okay. Here she's back. All righty. All right. Welcome back.
Sorry. I don't know what happened. This never happens during court. Of course, it happens now.
Right. No, it's fine. I mean, technology, right? So we get that happens. And so I think that you stopped when you talked about it went out when you started to talk about you were involved with the estate planning with her family. That's how you kind of came in.
Yeah. So the goal was to get rid of the criminal charges because they're ridiculous, but then the property was going to stay in the family. That was never a question of the fact that the property wasn't going to stay in the family. When I first came involved, between the first hearing and the second hearing is when we were contacted by AEP from the right-of-way agent. And the right-of-way agent sent me, he apparently went out to the house and saw Lady T's son. And when he saw Lady T's son, he told him, you need to contact our attorney because we have these criminal charges pending. And apparently they weren't aware of that.
I'm going to share the screen right now so that, can you see this?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so I just wanted people to see, is it showing up in the, okay, yeah. I don't have two screens today, so I can't see, but this is the information that Attorney McCree received from AEP. And essentially they are trying to update some of the existing power lines, the wooden ones, to steel poles in various neighborhoods, which is going to stretch about 7 miles throughout Benton Harbor and the Fairplain area. And so they routed it throughout various neighborhoods, connecting at some of the various substations and so on and so forth. And so obviously it's a very needed project in our area. The lines definitely need to be updated, and it's going to help strengthen like the local electric transmission system. So, something that is very much needed for our area. Do you want me to speak a little bit to that, Elizabeth, or do you have some more?
So before you do, I just want to state that I got the email that had those pictures with it, along with an easement deed. So he was requesting that we sign, while the criminal case was pending, an easement deed that would have allowed them to, do whatever they wanted to do in regards to this project going forward. So an easement deed would not have turned over full ownership of the property to AEP, but it would have given them the ability to do whatever they needed to do to complete their project. Okay. So that's what we were told at the time. I told them we were not signing any deed of that nature, or even considering that, until the criminal charges were dismissed. And since that time, I have not heard from the right-of-way agent or anybody else from AEP. He told me that he was not aware of the criminal charges. But I knew when I went to the second motion hearing in the case that the city was aware of AEP being involved, even though he did not know that AEP had reached out to us in regards to the easement deed. And AEP offered to demo the property. So they offered to pay for the demolition of the property in order, if we had signed that easement deed. So there have been discussions about, if you do that, then, the case will go away because, it's been difficult for you to get a private contractor. That private contractor also had been contacted by AEP about demolishing all the buildings, all the commercial buildings on that side of Empire. That's how I found out about that, because I was working with the same contractor. And so then I asked AEP about it, and they were like, oh yeah, we're waiting to get a bid from them to demolish all of these buildings. And so, when I was at court, even the bailiff said, oh yeah, I've heard about this project. I don't live in the city of Benton Harbor, but I've heard about this project at, some different township meetings and things of that nature being discussed. This has been discussed even pre-pandemic. And the documents that you got, the pictures, have a timeline that show the fact that this has been discussed for a significant period of time. And so I said, I don't know how the city attorney doesn't know about this if this is something that's been discussed at multiple city meetings, unless for some reason they're leaving the city of Benton Harbor out of it. And I never got a response to that response. But we were not going to sign an easement deed, because even though I know what an easement deed is, I know what takings are, I know what eminent domain is, I knew, when I looked through those pictures, what we were coming into, which was, first you sign an easement deed, and then all of a sudden it's, we need this whole property to do whatever it is we need to do for the government, and we'll compensate you. That's what eminent domain means. It gives governments the power to take people's property if they believe that there is an overall greater good for the community, but they are supposed to justly compensate them. That's what the Fifth Amendment says. But most lawsuits come from the fact that oftentimes the government's valuation of what they consider just compensation is not appropriate. Plus, it takes away the ownership right from people who are often disenfranchised.
Yeah. And so that is what I kind of want to point people at today, because what is happening here is a huge, disenfranchisement of people, particularly, Black landowners in an urban city. And so commercial corridors, a lot of times we talk a lot about the fact that, the lack of access to basic amenities within our community, let alone the city of Benton Harbor. You almost have to go to the township or other areas to even do your shopping, your basic shopping. But commercial corridors, when we talk about community revitalization, play such an integral part in how we, our day-to-day living. So having access to these structures and these buildings to bring new life into the community and create access for the people who live there, who may not even have transportation to get to these other places, is so important to what's happening in this change that's happening. And so I showed you guys the plan from AEP, and I did have the opportunity to speak to them because I want to point out just the fact that this decision was made from the city manager, and that, as a community, we really have to push back on these things and start paying attention, because if we don't, and if organizations like the CDC or the Beth McCrees didn't exist to highlight these things, imagine how much we have missed because of situations like this. And so with the AEP project, I was able to speak to 2 reps from their company, and they confirmed with me that they had met with the city manager. Now we're getting some spam coming here. They met with the city manager at least maybe 2 years ago at this point, where he agreed to their development plan for these power lines in that Empire corridor. So they were trying to figure out the best route to take, and could have avoided that area if they had been giving some indication from the city that this was going to be a priority area. Mm-hmm. And so what I am gathering is that I'm going to give the full picture. AEP is saying that they met with Ellis Mitchell a number of times, and that they also went in front of a committee. They weren't sure which committee. They said safety. The chief does not remember it. And I know that after you go to the committee, it then has to go to the full commission, right? And so I don't know if that ever happened, because there was no conversation with me about it actually going to the full commission to be voted upon. Mm-hmm. And none of the city elected officials that I have spoken with even know that this is happening, right? So they don't know about AEP's plan to this capacity, that it was going to affect that corridor. And so speaking to AEP last week, they said that they're so far along in this project that it will cost them, millions of dollars to reroute it at this point, and that, they felt as if they were doing their due diligence in this. And so for the city manager to be able to make a decision about something that was going to affect not only those 3 property owners, but also that entire community, without it going for vetting by the commission and the people in this community, particularly the people who live in that direct community, that is not right. And that is why you end up with these policy issues that eventually turn into land grabs, right? Because, according to AEP, they're so far along in this process that, they're giving the property owners time to agree to this. But if they don't, then they will move to condemn the properties and file eminent domain against these property owners anyway. And so on one hand, you have Ellis Mitchell communicating with myself and this family as if they're doing their due process to see what we need to do to take this property off being condemned, so that we could revitalize and turn this neighborhood around, right? Meanwhile, that what you agreed to, and that at some point, unless the community fights back and pushes back and hold their elected officials accountable for fighting for us, that this is what's going to happen to this corridor. And so you're going through the motion with us, knowing that you had agreed to this. And so I just want to show you guys another reason, because, I've been so upset about this, because I know that this is how, these things happen all the time, right? And so I just want to just kind of...
Before you do that, can I, because this is important to me, because people... we just had this conversation on Thursday where we heard a lot about Chicago at the community grand rounds, and, some of the things happening in Chicago. And I want to give examples of how that has happened here and has been happening here for a long time.
Okay, I'm going to take myself out while you talk so I can grab my charger.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give 3 examples of this. The first example is in the city of Benton Harbor. And this would have happened in the early 2000s, because I graduated from high school in 2001. When the Whirlpool headquarters was built in the city of Benton Harbor, right there on Main Street as you cross over into St. Joe by the river, there used to be, and people who have my friends on Facebook have seen this before, but there used to be a little street that used to run right along the water, and it was dipped. And I know this for a fact because I very often drove from Lake Michigan Catholic to Benton Harbor High School or to the library where I worked when I was in high school. And oftentimes I used that little street. So I used that street probably 3 or 4 times a week from, 99, 2000, 2001. And the road always curved down. And so if I was coming from St. Joe, from Lake Michigan Catholic to Benton Harbor High School, and I took that street, if I was driving, my passenger side would kind of be sitting down. So when I heard that they were going to build the Whirlpool headquarters there, and that part of what Whirlpool wanted was to make that area green space for their clients. And of course, at the time they said for, people in the community be able to come over there and walk and have lunch and all those other things. The first thing that I thought was that's going to be a problem, because the road curves down for a reason, because when the water levels rise, it keeps the water from coming up onto the street. I said that when I was in undergrad in 2001, 2002, 2003. And of course, now we see every year during times when the water rises in that area that the streets get flooded. And the reason the streets get flooded is because that little path that used to send the water back down or help it from not coming back up is gone, because now it is level. In fact, it is above the water level. And I'm sure that there were all kind of nice little presentations done and studies submitted to say that that wasn't going to be the case, but that ended up being the case. So then it became a battle over who owns the road. Is it MDOT because it is a state road, because it is emergency at Highway 94, or is it a local city issue? And that problem lasted, and that discussion lasts up through this day, when there started to be all these discussions about fixing the flooding. But the reason that flooding exists is because that little road got taken away. Okay. Second example is in Benton Township. I got invited to all the meetings. I went to one at Overflow Church, I believe it was, where, they put up these big pictures. And this was in discussion about making Napier one lane. And, this was back in, I'm going to say 2018, maybe early 2019. And they had us all go around with little sticky notes and put up the positive and negative and everything else. The overwhelming response from that meeting was that we need 2 lanes on Napier. That one lane, there's not like we're getting too much traffic when people leave certain, places from the area of the day, and they're coming back into Benton Harbor, they're going from Benton Harbor into St. Joe, that we need 2 lanes of traffic. Next thing I know, during the middle of the pandemic, all of a sudden we're making both sides of Napier one lane, even though all of us at that meeting were saying, this is not a good idea. Mm-hmm. We're all for bike paths and everything else. But, turning this into one lane is going to become an issue. We'll see where that goes, because that's a fairly recent development. But, again, the flooding and everything that happened over at the Old Country Club and everything else, all this is tied in together. Mm-hmm. Last example is what would be Sodas Township on Sodas Parkway, as they were building 31. Multiple people who lived over there and still over there, and some of their houses are there, are now below the level of the bypass for 31, and have had flooding issues ever since that happened. And that happened when I was in middle school or elementary school. And that was an eminent domain issue. They came and said, you don't have a choice. We're going to take this area to build this highway. Here's your compensation for it. And there were court cases that lasted for a while because people said, you're not paying me what it's worth.
Yeah, and my family's land was my dad's land. It belongs to me now, but yeah, it was 10 acres, I believe, that they took from him for eminent domain for the purpose of developing this highway. So
yeah, so those are just, when they say, I think we talked last time, like, we're not conspiracy theorists. Neither of us are conspiracy theorists. These are facts. Those are 3 examples. Over a period of years of things that have happened here that, initiate these issues. And in each of those situations, there were community meetings and there were, plans presented. So we might be able to dig back and see if this was ever actually presented to the commission. But we know that because of emergency management and because of the structure in the city of Benton Harbor government, that a lot of this day to day gets done by discussions with the city manager. And at the meeting that you and I went to, you specifically asked the city manager if he had heard anything about this AEP project. And he said,
Commissioner, we were all standing together, but Commissioner Henderson is who asked him that question because she was just kind of floored by it.
Yeah. And he said he had never heard of it.
To our face.
Never heard of it. And so that to me, and I said it at the time, and I've been saying it ever since, either means like they specifically shut Benton Harbor out, the city of Benton Harbor out, or somebody is lying to our face. Those are the only two options, and neither of them are good.
Right. Yeah. And so I know people have some questions, so we'll get to them at some point too. He absolutely needs to be held accountable, Miss Diane. But I just want to share my screen because it relates to what we're talking about, what Elizabeth was just talking about, and how these developments, give me a second. All right, can you see my screen okay?
I can see it.
Alrighty, perfect. And so this here is Lady T's building. So this is the Empire Corridor. This is Broadway. This is Empire here. And then this is another property owner who's been affected by this as well. I know that AEP has contacted him to sell his building. And then this building here is another property owner, not local, but they own BJ's, and then they also own the Marathon gas station out by the Sonic. So I was able to pop in on him last week once I found that out. And he did tell me that he has signed with AEP to have this property demoed and, for their project. And so right now he is the only property who has committed to that. But I just want to show you guys, this is a Beacon website. It's a public website if anyone wants to check it out. But right here, right, this is a property that's vacant, as you can see, and it's owned by who? The city of Benton Harbor. So instead of routing the lines on the property that you own that's already vacant, you decided to disenfranchise 3 property owners and an entire community that could benefit from the revitalization of these properties. And so, granted, this decision was apparently made a couple years ago, but when we talk about outlook of the city, this has always been a very important piece of the community. But also, like I said, this vacant property here, why wouldn't you route it this way instead of agreeing to a project that was going to force people to ultimately demo their property? And so I just wanted to share that and highlight that. I'm going to be calling on city officials to really take a look into this, because we know that there are a lot of things that the city manager handles day to day, but there should be some oversight. So like, where's the checks and balances, and how are people being able to make the decisions that are going to affect this community without there being some type of oversight on what he's doing, whether that is by official capacity or by design, or they're just allowing that. There is some checks and balances. I don't think that it's being activated and used properly, and it needs to be. And so we're going to continue some discussions. I'm going to be emailing the city manager and the entire body today about this, because this absolutely should not be happening. Those buildings need to remain intact. And if we don't have people at the table who is going to be protecting property owners and the citizens of this community, it is time up for them. It is time up for these things to us to be allowing these things to happen. And so I'm very strong when I speak about these things, or very firm in that opinion, because a lot of the conversations with a work that a lot of us are doing, if we don't have the right people at the table, we're not going to be able to make these things happen. And so we do need people at the table that's going to benefit us. And so I'm just going to go through to see if there are any questions. If you have any questions for Elizabeth and myself, please let us know. And again, I'll continue to keep people up to date on what's happening, but we will be moving forward to figure out how we can save these properties. If there's something that needs to be done, is this something that the city commission did approve or did they not in fact approve? Because like I said, a lot of them are saying that they this is the first that they're hearing about this, and they've been urging me to press forward with this. And so yeah, it is mind-blowing.
And that's the meeting that we went to a few Mondays ago. I sat through the discussion in regards to the statutes for the Unified Civic Monuments Project. And there were a lot of questions, and many of the commissioners were able to recall, you brought this to us before. We had meetings about this and this. We did this and this. We did all these other things. But nobody seems to recall hearing any information or being told any information in regards to not only these properties that are owned by the city on one side of Broadway, and then commercial buildings, but there's all kinds of residential property back there as well. That it's all, there's residential properties that would be impacted by AEP coming in and doing all of this, especially if they start talking about substations and all these other things that they want to put in there. And nobody seems to want to recall or be able to tell us that they remember any discussions about that.
Yeah. I will say, to me, they did mention to me on the phone that it's not a substation right now. It is just to replace the existing lines. And in order to do that, they would need to demo the buildings to replace this line. I'm not familiar with the process, so I can't go into the details of that. But I do know there are some lines now are run under the ground. So there are other options.
Absolutely.
I feel I don't know if those are more expensive options, but what would be the next steps to stop things like this? Well, first, Elizabeth, can you talk a little bit about your next steps and if there's any way in which we can support you in that?
So as far as Lady T's criminal case is concerned, I'm doing all the procedural stuff as far as appealing it and hoping that the city will just dismiss the case. Once the case is dismissed, then we still have things to do in regards to figuring out how to go forward with the property, especially if they file to take the property. So, in that sense, if they do initiate an eminent domain action, then it's about, seeing what they're valuing the property at, seeing what they're offering in regards to it. Eminent domain is a large power that city, state, and federal governments have. So, that's a large fight to try to stop it if that's what they're seeking to do. But there are ways to litigate against that. So I guess the biggest thing is, if it comes to that point, it's going to take a lot of backing to be able to represent the people who want representation and fighting back against the eminent domain. But that's a hurdle that I think we can climb, when we get there. As far as stopping this from going forward, we as individuals, citizens, and business owners need to get more involved in the process. So, I stopped going to those meetings that I kept getting invited to, where, there were pictures up and they wanted me to put little sticky notes on the because I figured out they weren't actually listening. They were doing it to do it, or they were very well-meaning, nice people from Michigan State or from, Wayne State, or, all these other schools, young people who were urban planners and everything else coming in. And I think that they all are, I think, well-meaning, wanting to learn, doing projects that they're doing, but they don't know Benton Harbor. They don't know Benton Township. They don't know Berrien County. And so, even if they were coming in, they were on a learning curve, because they may come in with all these plans about this is what looks nice and this is what has worked in Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo and but they don't know the history of this area. Like we who are from here know the history of this area to be involved in that planning. And so, I think that, bringing the know-how, bringing the academic from those organizations is great, but it's the follow-through. So we do all these little meetings with the Post-it notes, and then there's never any follow-through in regards to it. And, and our city commissioners, our elected officials, county commissioners, everybody has to be more well-informed about these projects. That's just a fact of it. And if they're not willing, or whatever the case may be, then that needs to be addressed in the power of the vote. But these are the kind of questions that we need to be asking people. I posted the other day on my Facebook about, school board elections in particular, and the things that we're asking people on school board elections as opposed to what we really need to be asking them. These are the kind of things that we need to be asking our elected officials, and saying, and then the answer to that is not, well, it's the city manager, because the charter is a city manager directed charter. Okay, so then what happens from that? And then talking to the city manager as well, because, like I said, it's what was told to us was, this is the first I'm hearing about it. I remember it clear as day. This is the first I am hearing about it. And I'm thinking, if a bailiff at the county courthouse knows about it, and you as a city manager of the city of Benton Harbor that has this large part of the plan, you've never heard about it, there's a problem here. So I was thinking, well, if that's true, there's some issues, but now that you're aware, hopefully you will follow up. But if that is not true, and you think that the two of us and one of your commissioners are silly enough to just kind of, okay, and to leave it at that and not go further, then, you don't understand your citizens. And there's many citizens who are, interested in these things, may not be fully aware of all the laws and everything else, but we'll help you get thank goodness for all this technology. Even when it freezes, we can come back and we'll talk about it, because being informed is going to be the biggest thing to help combat this going forward. I was 19, 20 years old when they were doing everything, taking away that road. But if anybody, and I was living in Atlanta at the time, but if anybody had asked me, I would have been like, well, that's a dumb idea, because the streets are going to flood. So I knew that at 19 or 20. And so now when I'm back here almost 40 and I see the street flood every year, I said, well, I could have told you that 20 years ago.
Yeah. So this question is, isn't the city manager appointed by the state? If this is an issue, what do we do? So we have been under emergency management at some point, which was appointed by the state, but in its current capacity, we're no longer under emergency management, and the city manager is hired by the commission. So the people that we elect there, that is who, we elect them to represent us, and then they hire the city manager. And so that is how we have this oversight, right? And I think a lot of times we see things are being done very rogue and not with this oversight, but the city commission has the power to address this because there are a number of things that have happened that, quite frankly, he was not held accountable for. And so I think that part of this, we have to start being, you hit it, Elizabeth, we have to start taking note of the process and really paying attention to what's happening in this meeting. I know the next city commission meeting is November 7th at 7 o'clock. That's on the Monday. So that's where the full body, the mayor, everyone will be meeting. The city manager should be there too. I will be there speaking about this issue, and I would urge anyone who's available, please come out to support this, because people need to know that it's time up for these types of behaviors and antics that are happening in our city. So yeah, I'll be there on the 7th. He is not appointed by the state. He is hired by our commission, who have the power to ensure that people are successfully representing us. So,
and just for a little historical context, I'm a historian as well, so I can't go away from that. There was a period of time where the city manager was appointed by the state under the emergency management law, which is a state law, which is a ridiculous state law, which still exists on the books, which is still being used in other communities and needs to be, in my opinion, repealed, but at the least amended. So there was a period of time, a significant period of time, where the city manager for the city of Benton Harbor was state appointed. And the very first city manager that the city of Benton Harbor had came in, and within the first couple weeks of his role, usurped all the power from the city commission. They basically could call meetings to order and adjourn meetings. He was making the day-to-day decisions. He was signing all the contracts. He didn't have to have the approval from the city commission in order to do those things. Those are the problems with emergency management. We've been in a period of time now for several years that emergency management ended. And so the city commission is now in charge. However, for a long time, I was going to every city commission meeting. When I first opened my office was across the street. And, part of the issue in hiring a city manager and hiring other administrators for the city is, the process that actually is used in order to do that. Which we are a small community, and I get that, there may be different concerns, but this is where you tap into the power of Benton Harbor that sometimes is outside of Benton Harbor. There are people from here who live in other places who work for city governments, large and small, state governments, large and small, across the country. And we need to be tapping into those people who have that experience in order to help educate us and teach us, give examples from their neighborhoods and people who know Benton Harbor as well. And also because when I lived in Georgia for 12 years, I still kept up as much as I could on the things that were happening in Benton Harbor. And that's why I think what you're doing, Ashley, is so important, because people can get on Facebook and see what's happening, and be able to hopefully help offer solutions. But we all have to work together in order to do it. And we have to stop being so divided. We have to stop being divided over personal issues, family beef from back in the day and such. Like, if we want to address these issues, we have to come to the table and address them. And it's going to take all of us together to be able to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more comments. Yeah, it's worth noting that it takes 5 votes to move things forward in the commission, correct? This is rather to create resolutions / fire someone. Yeah, I believe that is true. You only need 5 votes. And so, yeah, he's hired by the commission, but there could be resolutions and other ways to get someone out of there if they didn't feel like he was doing a sufficient job. So,
yeah. And I will say this as well. This is important because, as an attorney, me and my friends in my groups, and especially when I lived in Atlanta, like a lot of what we did when we did legislative work outside of our day-to-day jobs was that we wrote resolutions. We helped to craft resolutions. We reviewed resolutions that other people had created. If you want to do something at a government level, you have to follow that procedural process. And so writing a resolution, getting it to the other commissioners in time, getting it to the people to review and have discussions about it. There's nothing that prevents that from happening. There's nothing that prevents us from talking about things. Things don't have to be like, oh, I'm slapping it down now and everybody, we're going to vote. That's not how. There may be an element of like, new social media, like, oh, I'm doing this. But, these discussions oftentimes have people working behind the scenes to draft what needs to be done, because the truth of the matter is, if there's anybody in administration who is no longer than an administration, and then you got to have something else to do. You have to have somebody else to be able to come in, take over the things of the city. You have to have somebody in mind. We don't want to go through another issue with the economic advisor, who the position sat empty for months and months and months. The commissioners felt that they weren't being involved in the search process. They didn't like the finalists that were brought from the search committee, and we went years and years and years without having an economic director. Mm-hmm. So working together to have that understanding and having a plan in place, preparation is a big part of it too.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a whole nother show topic, economic development and all that too. So, but yeah, so like I said, we just wanted to make sure we gave an update to this. I'm definitely going to be keeping you guys abreast to what's happening. As we, I don't know if we'll be able to stop the demolition of these properties. Like I said, I spoke with some commissioners and they have very strong feelings that the fact that, this should not be happening, because they did not even agree to this. It was not something that went through their committee to do something like this. And so I don't know what will come of that, but I do know that moving forward with the work that is being done and that we would like to do, we need people who are informed about this process to be at the tables. I'm at a lot of the meetings, a lot of people, Deidre's at the meeting, Jane's, right? We are, I'll bring snacks. I don't know if you can eat in there, but I'll bring snacks. Like we need people to come out and start being, at the table and listening to these things as they are being done. And so, so when these things come up, we'll be able to say oh, this happened or this never happened. And in this case, it's looking like, there was just no oversight at all about this decision that was made for that corridor. So
And if you're being impacted, reach out. If you have been contacted by AEP or by somebody else, hey, we need you to sign this, we're going to offer you this, whatever the case may be, you need to reach out to me. Everybody has my number. Everybody has my email or Facebook or whatever, in order to get in contact with me. I might not be able to handle it myself, but I can get you to the folks who can be able to help you. And that's the big thing too. Like, you don't just go signing papers and not knowing, what they mean. Because like I said, an easement deed, for example, gets filed with the Register of Deeds. It gives, in this case, AEP ownership right in that property to be able to do what they need to do in order to, achieve the easement. So even though you don't think, hey, I'm signing over all my rights, it's step one. It's step one in an eminent domain case. And that's going to be, example number one, exhibit number one in a, lawsuit or a response to a lawsuit to, when eminent domain comes down. So you have to be cognizant of that. And, I know that your organization, Ashley, does a lot in regards to homeowners and homeowners' rights and, knowing what to do. And I think one of the biggest things is you have to have a team. Once you own the house, you still need to be dealing with finances and who's going to do the upkeep. And, that's the other, part of this too. Like, we know, with Ladies Tea's property, the awning needs to be addressed. There's other things that need to be addressed that we're working on. But again, the family is working on that while they're dealing with her health issues. And to take time away from dealing with her health issues to have to be put in the rigmarole of, what's happening with the governments who are not being fully honest with us about what's happening, is cruel. Mm-hmm. I know, like, that's the only way that I can describe this.
Yeah.
And, even if it's somebody saying, well, I'm not intentionally being cruel. I hear stuff like that every day. I'm not, I'm working in the system. I'm not somebody who has racial bias. I'm not, but you work in a system that does. So when you work in a system that is built that way, you have to be cognizant of that every day. Mm-hmm. So if you are, as commissioners, if you are supposed to be looking at this plan, really look back and see, like, what area is this impacting and what is the bigger picture? Like, when you put that map up, I'm not just thinking about, the property that's owned by the city that's right there in those 3 buildings. I know the people who live right behind them on Broadway. I know that the center that the Browns own is further down the street. I know that the high school is over here on this side of the street. I know that the street ministry is on the other side of the street. I know that, because I'm from here and I'm not just somebody academic coming in with this lens of like, well, this makes the most sense for the best power source of, I also know what the community is like. And that's where we can bring in our voice. Mm-hmm. And we have to make people respect that voice, because their history isn't everything, but, engineering isn't everything either. Mm-hmm. You have to combine those things together to have a community.
Yeah.
It's not just one or the other. So we all need to sit down together and figure out how is this going to work best to give us the power source that we need to help run the homes and businesses and schools and everything else in the area, but also be cognizant of the people who are a part of the community and what it does to them.
Yeah, and we were hoping to be able to have that conversation with the city and AEP and really sit down to see if it could be rerouted, how we could make this work. But in my last call with them, they were pretty adamant about the fact that it likely is very unlikely to happen. And I also want to note that, we have been waiting on the city manager to follow up with us regarding, what's the list of the things that could be done to rectify the situation, get it off the condemned list, and drop the charges. And while we were waiting on that, I followed up again last week, and the response because I was trying to meet with the city manager along with Lady T's son. We were going to go in, and the city manager is now saying that he needs to, because it's a criminal, a legal matter, he has to consult the city attorney now. So now we haven't gotten any feedback, and now he won't meet with me regarding this project.
Which is very interesting, because if the city prosecutor, who's also the city attorney, just dropped the charges, then there wouldn't be a pending legal matter at all. They wouldn't exist. So then we could have a discussion. Yeah. So, the thing about it is, like, I get the AP's big company and but I've never taken no. That may be a flaw more than a help for me, but if there's a plan that's put into place to reroute it, we can make AEP listen to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I'm willing to do whatever I need to do, outside of whatever happens with Lady T in particular to do that. And we need to have everybody in the community be able to support it, because this is what they use. So, oh no, I'm sorry, we can't talk to you because there's a pending legal matter. Well, you all have the ability to take away that pending legal matter, which would be just, so that we can have the discussion.
Yeah. And so as an organization, we are moving to, we want to prevent this. And so I've been following up with the 2 additional property owners. Obviously, we know that Lady T's family would like to keep this property. The last I spoke with the other property owner, he brought his building back to life. He was looking forward to opening, And so the last I heard from him is that he was interested in keeping his building. This was a few weeks ago. So and I know that they have since, still working on getting him to sign things over as well, or to agree to whatever terms they're laying out for him. But as an organization, we are moving to, see what we can do to prevent the demolition of that commercial space. And then also on a personal level, I've been, really speaking to some of the commissioners, and I would like to see residents at the meeting on November 7th at 7:00, because I will be speaking about this, and I am going to be asking that the commissioners do something about what's been happening here. And so with our city manager and with this AEP situation. So please come out for that, share the word. We'll be doing some more promotional things around that as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll make sure that Elizabeth gets them. Richard said, Elizabeth, please consider pursuing a city attorney role. The city needs caring people.
No, thank you. I will tell you this. I'm a solo practitioner. I have a ton of wonderful foster kids who I represent, and people doing estate planning. My plate is full. But that being said, I'm more than willing to help others. And like I've been telling people, we could have 15 attorneys show up tomorrow, and all of them would have more than enough work. Somebody could be the city attorney full time and would have more than enough work to do. And, we need to start. There's a whole lot of people from here who are in law school, who have graduated from law school, things of that nature, who we can be recruiting and looking, and I would support them all the way. But I don't want the job. And I need to make that clear, because the same thing when I went to the county commission and talked about the public defender's office, everybody was saying, oh, she wants to be the public defender. Never one day in my life would I want to be the public defender. I've been indigent defense counsel before, and I don't want the job. I just want people's rights to be protected. And that's the same way I feel here. There's no self-interest in anything that I'm saying. In fact, a lot of times I get, pushback because of the things that I say, and get called an agitator and all those other things. I don't want the job, but I do want them to do better.
Yeah.
So, but right, I want to make that clear. I am not lobbying for the job. I'm not lobbying to be a school board attorney. Somebody responded to me about that with my school board comment. I don't have the time. But, I do think that we should not be paying $600 an hour to Truan to be the school board's attorney or the school's attorney. So I don't want the job. I just want people to be informed, and hopefully somebody will come who wants to do that. But I'm not jockeying for anybody's position. I'm good where I am. I've got too much on my plate.
She said, I'm good. But no, I personally really appreciate your advocacy and you lending your voice to this community and the things that matter. Just one more comment before we go. Diane said, thank God they have Elizabeth providing support, not only dealing with Lady T's health issues. They will never understand all the legal aspects. So, just thank you for being a champion for this community and for our people, and guiding this family. I know that the work we're not to the finish line yet, but I'm just really grateful and thankful that you have decided to work hand in hand with this family and to come on with us, to be so open and speak with us about it, because it really is important to get this word out and let people know that these things are happening. They're very real. I know a lot of times we read about them happening in a lot of the larger communities, but they're happening all the time in communities like Ben Harbor. And so thank you so much for your time and for your work and the effort that you put into this.
And again, thank you for everything you do. This is a vocation for me. Sometimes, a lot of days I wake up and when I went to Mexico, I would have loved to stayed and like opened a hair braiding spot or something. I don't know how to braid hair. I would have had somebody else to do it. But, I know that this portion of it, as far as the education piece, is a part of my vocation. And I know that you feel the same way about the work that you do. And, I just want to continue to lift you up as well, because that's one of the things when people come back to the community, you get all kind of pushback, things like I was saying about people saying what they think your true intentions are. But I know from the first moment that you and I talked that your intention is good, and I think the team that you put together is the same. And a lot of people who are working with you, Deidre and Ambi, and people who I've known for years are here for this community, and together we will continue to fight, but we need more people on the team. So come out and help support, and don't be afraid to support. We have a lot of elders who are tired. I know they'll tell me like, I used to do this, and this. So it is time for those of us. I guess I'm an older millennial. I'm a geriatric millennial is what they call me. I'm at the cusp of Generation X millennial. And then your group of, millennials and Gen Zs and whoever, it's time for us to become informed and become empowered and, step up for the folks who have been doing the work, but then also do our part of the work, and then bring the next generation with us. They're smart. These are some smart kids, and they care about this community too, and they have dealt with a lot of things in this community. And what better than to teach them how to do this stuff, so then they can come back if they choose, after they get the training, and help better their community too. All of us generationally have to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys again for tuning in. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time. As soon as I find out more information, I'll keep you updated. I know that there's some other cases that Elizabeth mentioned as well that she'll be just attending the trials for, not necessarily representing, that are really tied into this case as well. And so we'll definitely keep you guys up to date.
Thank you.
Bye.